pushers have been executed.
That's true, yes.
A squad of young prison officers in training outside Stanley Jail, observed by the professional eye of John Fleming, an Englishman who retired as a superintendent after 20 years with this prison service. He'd been in the Royal Navy before coming to Hong Kong and has now retired on a pension to run a local car hire firm, though believes that in 7 years' time he could be back on duty again. A disciplinarian and a stickler for punctuality, the most important appointments of his prison career were all at 7 a.m. His duty then was fast and final. Quite final.
There's a gallows here in Stanley Prison, and it's ready for action even today. Where actually is it?
Just in the small block on the extreme right, where the slatted windows are.
Now, you would know about that because you were the Hong Kong hangman.
That is correct, yes.
How did that happen?
Well, I was asked if I would like to volunteer, and of course I did because I strongly believe in capital punishment.
How many men did you actually hang?
7.
In that block there?
In that same block.
You were also the colony flogger at that time.
That's correct, but that's the wrong term to use.
Of course.
People normally use the term flogging, but in fact it's only caning. Flogging is when they use the cat of nine tails. No, they use a rattan cane.
How many prisoners were caned by you?
Around about 50, I suppose, altogether, offhand.
Really? And that is a punishment that's still permitted?
Yes, it's still on the books, and it's still vetted out now and again by the magistrates. But it's not used so often these days.
It is a ferociously painful experience, I'm sure of that, because you cane them in the same spot, do you not? Every lash?
Every lash is on the same target, to open up the gap, the wound, wider.
So they're scarred for life, these men?
Indeed they are, yes.
Certainly physically, and I suppose mentally as well. What happens, John Fleming, what happens on the morning of an execution?
Well, at 5 to 7, we ask if there's any last requests, and then we put him in a straitjacket and put a hood over his head, and then we escort him to the execution chamber. Then when he's on the flap, the trap door, then we put the noose over his neck and strap his legs, and then push a lever, and he's gone. Hopefully, that is. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes, unfortunately, the neck doesn't break, in which case, of course, they strangle to death.
Now, that takes several minutes, I presume.
Well, in fact, we leave them hanging there anyway for 20 minutes. So even if the neck isn't broken, then he's still strangled to death anyway.
What are you doing during that time?
Well, we're going for a cup of tea.
You leave him hanging there. You hope that his neck has been broken, but if he hasn't, he will strangle to death.
Yes.
Were you ever concerned about this? Did it spoil your morning tea?
No, but these people are hard people, you know, and some of the murders they commit are quite horrendous. Stabbing babies to death or chopping people up and putting them in cardboard boxes. They are dreadful, these murderers. And they're hard men. When they go to the execution chamber, they're not dragged kicking and screaming as one would appear on TV films and things like that. No way. They're quite calm and collected.
The men you hanged were relaxed about it, you're saying?
Indeed. One informed me in perfect English, don't be nervous.
He said that to you?
He said that to me, indeed, yeah.
And you were about to hang him? What did you say?
I didn't say anything. I wasn't worried. I wasn't going to be hung. Nor was I nervous.
What sort of crimes have these men committed?
Well, there's one that stabbed a baby to death during a robbery because it was making too much noise. There was 3 that cut off the ear of the son of a wealthy person in Hong Kong. But because he screamed so much, then they murdered him.
They were kidnapping, weren't they?
They were kidnapping, which then turned out to be murder. A farmer killed his wife. One I particularly remember is a 21-year-old prisoner who murdered a prison guard during an escape. He's, in fact, the only one that I've known to collapse before we took him to the scaffold. But we still carried him there anyway. He still met his appointment at 7 o'clock.
Now, what is the atmosphere in the prison at 7 o'clock on those mornings?
It's strange, but normally, on ordinary days, there's a tremendous amount of noise of 3,000, 4,000 prisoners awakening. But on the morning of an execution, you can hear a pin drop. It's dead silent. All the prisoners, of course, are well aware through the jungle grapevine that an execution is taking place. And it's deathly silent until after the execution has been completed.
You never had to hang an expat. You never had to hang a Gweilo.
No, we never had. No. In fact, the last one sentenced for murder was reprieved, and he finished his sentence in England, and he killed another woman.
Why do you believe you were chosen for the job?
Well, it wasn't really. Several people were asked if they were interested, and they viewed an execution, and if they stood up to the execution without feeling sick, and if they were still interested, then they had the job.
And you?
Well, I took the job because, to me, I didn't feel anything, and also we had half a day off after the execution.
Any other perks?
Well, we received $75 per neck, which was quite a lot in those days, of course.
How about the caning?
Oh, caning, that was only $50 a month. Very little in those days, perhaps a little bit more now.
The Chinese seem to follow your views about capital punishment, do they not? Except
Yes,
that they execute their prisoners.
Yes, they shoot them.
Will you be prepared to resume your position as executioner when the Chinese return in '97?
Yes, I would, regardless of whether they hung them or shot them. Yes, I would be quite prepared to carry on.
Why are you so ready to volunteer?
Because I firmly believe in capital punishment. I know a lot of people say that executing a prisoner doesn't bring back the victim, but at the same time, it doesn't allow the murderer to carry on and kill somebody else later on in life, which has happened in 2 cases to my knowledge. One of them, which was quite severe, one man was sentenced to death for killing 11 people in central Hong Kong, called an arson murder, and he was reprieved. And he's since standing out behind me, and he killed another prisoner and has been reprieved again. Had he been executed, there would have been at least one person still alive today.
Now, did being a public hangman make you a popular figure? Didn't you find people nudging each other as you came in the room, saying,
No, not at all.
That's him?
No, not at all. No, never. It wasn't the topic of a normal discussion, really.
But, I mean, what about have you been married more than once?
4 times, in fact.
Aha. Does that suggest that some of your wives didn't like your job?
No, not at all. They're well aware of what I did because I used to leave early in the morning to carry out the executions when normally, in an ordinary day's work, I wouldn't leave so early. But they were in favour of capital punishment anyway. So was most of the Chinese in Hong Kong.
Did you sleep well the night before?
Very much so. In fact, my main worry was being late. The discipline service, of course, if you're late, then you're put on a charge, and I was worried about being late for my appointment.
You worried about oversleeping?
Well, yes, I didn't want to leave the prisoner hanging around.